All right, hello everybody. I'm Brett Shimek. This is the second part of my presentation on Glacier Travel. Thank you guys for joining today, and for those of you watching from home, hope you enjoy this as much as everybody in person will. So today we're going to go over a review of what we went over last time. A couple of you weren't here for the last one, so we'll cover what we did in the first one real quick. We'll go over some of the necessary gear for Glacier Travel, the basics of team compatibility, and then we're going to touch just a little bit on the basics of rescue if you're part of a Glacier team when an incident occurs. That's a whole course in itself, so don't think that you're going to be experts by any means at the end of this, but it'll be a start. Okay, so this is just a little bit of review of what we covered for glacier accumulation and how they break. The flow is what causes it, and then this is the picture we used last time of snow bridges here, right, which is what form crevasses, and that's where it's dangerous. And you can see this is a good example of a four-person rope team, pretty well spaced out, traveling over what you can pretty much assume is a crevasse from here. Hopefully it doesn't continue up into there. But yeah, just to touch on some of the glacier anatomy, and then a little preview on what we're going to be talking about here too with traveling as part of a team. So the equipment that's super important to keep in mind when you're getting ready for glacier travel, probably your most important piece of equipment is your rope. So there's quite a few different kinds of rope that you're looking for. Static versus dynamic. So static rope doesn't stretch at all. Dynamic rope is generally used in sport climbing and a little bit in ice climbing as well, and it's designed to stretch to take an impact from a fall, so it's not all transferred into the climber. However, when you're traveling on a glacier, you don't really want that stretch, because if somebody does fall, all that stretch is stretch in the rope that you have to pull out as you're pulling somebody, hauling them out of a crevasse. So you generally want to stick with static ropes for glacier travel. And then another thing to consider is treated versus untreated. So a lot of these companies now are treating their ropes with dry treatments, which basically prevents them from soaking up water and getting heavier, which seems kind of counterintuitive for glacier travel, but it's not always completely frozen, and the more it soaks up water, the heavier it gets, and then it also pretty significantly impacts the strength of the rope while you're doing that kind of stuff. And they used to use, and they still do sometimes on the fixed lines on Everest, they use water ski ropes, because those are about as treated as they get. They're so plastic that they don't soak up any water at all. And then another really important thing you want to take into consideration is the weight of the rope, which plays into the length and the diameter. Obviously, the longer the rope and the thicker the rope, the heavier it's going to be. And since you are traveling across a glacier, you have to haul that around with you the entire way. So you don't want an unnecessarily large and long rope. For if you're traveling as part of a two-person team, you don't need 70 meters of rope between the two of you. That's just ridiculous, and would be incredibly cumbersome and not a whole lot of fun to carry around. So this is how you're going to attach yourself to the rope as you're traveling with part of your team. So this is just made out of standard cordlet here, super cheap stuff. You can find it at any hardware store, gas station, pretty much anywhere, and it all serves the same purpose. So what you're doing with this is you're tying a binding knot around your rope so that it'll slide as you're traveling, and then if it impacts at all, whether it's up or down, and you can tie these so they're directional or just one way, it cinches down on itself, and then it keeps it from sliding. So the whole point of that is if you need to move along your line so that you're not completely fixed in, you can, but in the event of either you falling or a team member falling, it'll catch itself. These are Jumars or mechanical ascenders, and this is just one variation of quite a few different types that are out there. And it's basically just a fancy, super expensive mechanical version of what a Prusik does. It makes your job a little bit easier, but you have a cam in here and the rope rides right through this way, so you would tie a loop on the end of this and then onto your harness, and you're going to slide that up or down the rope as you need. And then it's the same thing if it gets impact loaded, or if you fall or if somebody else falls, it's going to cinch down on itself and keep you from moving anywhere. And generally when you fall in a crevasse, you're going to use a combination of these two things, of mechanical ascenders and Prusiks, to basically shimmy your way up the rope if you're capable of self-rescue. If not, hopefully you have competent team members or a guide or somebody else to haul you out of there. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's kind of the only way to do it. So one thing, probably the most important thing to think about when you're building these rope teams, and it's not a luxury that you always have, it kind of depends on how you're traveling and who you're traveling with, but it's team compatibility. So you don't want super dissimilar people linked up on the same rope. attitudes play into this a lot. If you have two people that really don't get along, maybe don't put them right next to each other in the rope line, because that's just going to be miserable for them and likely for everybody else in the party as well. So an ideal rope team size is 2 to 4 people. In this picture, you've got 5. You've got one person coming up, which isn't uncommon, but it's not ideal. One thing you also want to consider is the size of the people. If you're traveling in 2-person rope teams, you don't want the 300-pound person with the 150-pound person, because if that 300-pound person falls into a crevasse, that 150-pound person is going right with them pretty much no matter what they do. They're just going to get sucked in. Fitness as well. If you have climbers on the same rope team with 1 or 2 of them being much more fit than the other people, you're going to have some serious conflicts there, because you are tethered together, and it's kind of like running a dog team where you can't have the slow people in front or they're going to get run over, and you can't have the super fast people in front either, because then they're going to drag everybody behind them and then everyone gets super mad. And then climbing ability is another thing to think about. As far as technical expertise in the area goes, that's something that's sometimes better to put the most experienced people with the least experienced people if you're not doing technical climbing, because the more experienced people obviously have been there, and then it gives them a really good opportunity to kind of teach the people that may not have as much time in the mountains. This is a handy little chart on the distance you want between team members as you're traveling. So if you have a 4-person team, you want about 8 meters, 3-person 10 meters, and then a 2-person 12 meters. So this plays into with your rope selection. If you know you're traveling with a 2-person team, and you only are, it's only suggested that you have 12 meters of distance between you, you don't need a 70-meter rope, right? You could probably get away with 30-meter rope is about the smallest they make, and you can even double it up and be extra safe if you wanted to. And then this is it's a little hard to see, but it's a little diagram of three little people traveling through a crevasse field here. So you can see the crevasses running this way, and this is the way you would want to travel, because you're exposing yourself to the least amount of risk as you're passing past these crevasses. And in the event somebody falls in either way, you have people on either side to help them out, as opposed to coming and crossing them perpendicular, where you have somebody at risk, sometimes 2 people at risk at the same time passing over those. All right, so now we're going to touch just a little bit on crevasse rescue, because at some point this is going to happen to you. It happens to everybody when they're traveling. Sometimes it's more serious than others. If you follow good standard practices and you have your good rope teams, you know your equipment, you know what you're doing, you can definitely minimize the risk that you're facing, and hopefully be able to get yourself out pretty quick. So if you're the person that's fallen, chances are you're looking down into something like that, and you're looking up into something like that, right? And neither of those are particularly pleasant things to see when you're not expecting them. It's a pretty sudden fall into a crevasse. It doesn't normally have a whole lot of warning. So if you're the person who's falling, what you're going to try to do is stop yourself as soon as possible. If you can stop yourself on a wedge or a snow bridge inside of the crevasse, something like this here, that's going to be a heck of a lot easier to get yourself out, or for your team members to get you out, than if you fall another 10, 15, 20 meters further down in the crevasse. And a lot of these crevasses, looking at that, I mean, you really have no idea how deep that goes. It could go for half a mile. Some crevasses in these ice fields are mile and a half deep, and that's not really something that you want to get involved in. So try to stay calm and move as little as possible, because the more you move, the more you pull on the person who's next in line behind you, and it just makes their job that much more difficult if you're down there squirming around. So the other rope team members are going to self-arrest. Hopefully you're lucky enough to have this sweater and those shades, because I think that helps your climbing ability. The cooler you look, the better you climb, and the more comfortable you are in the mountains. So basically you're taking your ice axe and your crampons and any purchase point you can, and you're just digging yourself into the snow. And then this one here shows kind of the two other members of the rope team are tripoded out, keeping this person likely dangling in midair, but also keeping them from falling any further into the crevasse, which is the end goal. And then what will eventually happen is one of these 2 people will stay anchored. One of them will remove themselves from the system, probably the furthest up person, because this is going to be the strongest anchor point. And they're going to come down and they're going to assist this person in anchoring and build a pretty complex, if this person can't pull themselves out, a pretty complex Z pulley system to haul themselves out of there. And that we'll go over a little bit more in the 25-minute presentation. But this is just a touch on on crevasse rescue and kind of the basics of what you need to know as a team member. All right, that's all I have. Thank you guys for your undivided attention, and we'll see you at the next presentation.